Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this September 24th City Commission budget meeting and public hearing. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and for those of you who are willing and able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance followed by the invocation. The invocation. Oh, we don't need to do that. Okay. All right. Just the pledge. Just the pledge. I'm sorry. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For some reason, the manager doesn't want to pray for us tonight, so the night we need it. No, I'm joking. Again, I want to thank everyone for making time and coming out this evening. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over to the manager for any agenda modifications.
Mr. Mayor, we do have the budget public hearing to adopt the final millage rate, but I have been asked, we have 3 other public hearings on the agenda, and folks that are waiting. I don't know if we have a lot of speakers or not, but the question is whether or not you want to entertain the other 3 first.
If there's no objection, we'll go ahead and begin with the non-budget item public hearings. I also want to acknowledge Commissioner Debbie Lightsey, our colleague from previous. Welcome, Commissioner. I know you're here on another item.
Saved you a seat.
Commissioner Miller said, we've saved you a seat, if you'd like to take it. I'll turn it over to the City Attorney to walk us through the first public hearing. City Attorney, that'd be.
Look.
City Attorney, these are the non-budget. Okay.
Okay. We're going forward with the budget?
Not the budget. Yeah.
Okay. Item 2.02, the first and only public hearing on the adoption of annual update on Tallahassee Leon County Comp Plan. It is ordinance number 15-0-33, an ordinance of the City of Tallahassee updating the capital improvement element of the 2030 Tallahassee Leon Comprehensive Plan.
I do not have any speakers on this item, but let me check this box real quick and make sure there's not an addition. No speakers.
Great. Commissioners, this is the first and only public hearing on the Capital Improvement Schedule Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Any questions, comments?
Move approval, Mr. Mayor.
There's a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. 2.03.
2.03 is the first and only public hearing on ordinance 15-Z-11AA, proposed amendment to the official zoning map to change the zoning classification from office residential OR1 zoning district to the Ariana Airport Center Planned Unit Development zoning district.
Move option 1.
Second.
City Attorney, is there?
What I was going to amend this set for a public hearing, but if option 1 is passed, then we're sending it back to the Planning Commission, which will also, the Planning Commission, because there's new evidence involved, will have a separate public hearing. Right. So my suggestion is to modify option 1 to leave the public hearing open tonight, and then when it comes back on November 24th, we will have an additional public hearing based on any new information we have.
Is that acceptable to the maker?
You might
That is
be
option
looking at a different option 1 that was updated recently on board docs.
That's ours.
Option 1 is continue the item to the October 28th City Commission meeting and remand the application to the Planning Commission for reconsideration.
He's just asking that we leave the public hearing open
rather
than closing the public
That's
hearing
fine.
tonight. That's fine to the maker and the seconder?
We can go ahead and take any speakers
Right.
public hearing, but we'd also leave it open so when we come back.
It's fine.
Got it. There's a motion and a second. I know Commissioner Maddox wants to speak. Are there any public speakers?
There are no speakers. I believe Russ Snyder, I think the indication is that would come back on On November the 24th.
November 24th.
Rather
We
than
wanted to
October
do
the
this
28th, due to the timing of the remanding to the Planning Commission.
Correct. It won't
Therefore,
go to the Planning Commission until November.
Got it. So you're asking that the public hearing be held on November 24th?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the motion can reflect that. Commissioner Maddox.
Mr. Attorney, is it appropriate for a brief comment on the merits?
Sure.
The application. Thank you. I just want to make sure we're okay quasi-judicially. I would urge the developer to come back with changes in the plan unit development, because I will not support this at this level, and I think the Planning Commission, from what I've seen, is going to come back with the same thing. So I don't think it's appropriate for where it's going, and I would urge changes before it gets back to us.
Right. There's a motion and a second to continue this item. Leave the public hearing open until November 24th, at which time it will be held, and remand the application to the Planning Commission for reconsideration. All those in favor of the motion, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. 2.04.
2.04 is the first and only public hearing on ordinance number 15-Z-28, proposed amendment to the Benjamin Run PUD concept plan. It's an ordinance of the City of Tallahassee amending the Benjamin Run Plan Unit Development Concept Plan on the official zoning map of the City of Tallahassee.
There are no speakers on this item.
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Richardson.
just a quick question, because I did have someone come by my office some time ago in opposition to this, and I don't know if there is still, from the surrounding neighborhood, was there still any opposition to this?
There were no speakers in opposition at the Planning Commission.
Okay. All right.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
There's a motion
Second.
and a second to approve the item. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. 2.05.
2.05 is the first and only public hearing on ordinance 15Z-31. It's proposed amendment to the official zoning map to change the zoning classification from the Residential Preservation 1, RP1 zoning district to the Braymore Park PUD.
Any speakers?
No speakers.
No speakers. Commissioners?
Move it.
There's a
Second.
motion and a second. No questions. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. Commissioners, we're now back up to item 2.01, which is our 2016 budget and Downtown Improvement Authority. I know there's some procedural things that need to happen, so I'll turn the mic over to the city manager and the city attorney.
Okay. Commissioners, today we're holding the second and final public hearing as required by state statute for the adoption of the fiscal year 2016 budget. At the first public hearing, which was Wednesday, September 16th, the City Commission adopted the tentative millage rate of 4.2 mills. You also provided some specific instructions and direction that you wanted staff to follow, and you wanted us to come back to you and report on those changes that you would like to see, and we are prepared to do that at this time. I know that Lou has to, before we take any action, has to read a number of actions that are required to be taken today, and then I'd like to have Raul come up and make the presentation.
Let's go ahead and let Raul make the presentation, then I'll make the statutory comments right before we go into the...
Thank you, Madam Manager, Mayor, and City Commissioners. As the Manager indicated, this is the second statutory required public hearing for the 2016 budget, and I'm going to talk about some of the changes that we made in the budget from the September 16th meeting when you all directed us to reduce the millage rate to 0.5 of a mill. But before I do that, I wanted to talk about something that was out there related to the increase in the budget going up $2 million from $704 million to $706 million. That is a total appropriated budget for the city, including all the enterprise funds as well as the general fund. As we go through the process, historically, when the budget's proposed in June timeframe, we do a lot of things after that until the budget is finally approved in September at the public hearings. We update payroll costs to make sure that the most recent payroll expenses are in the budget for the following year. In this case, this year, we didn't get healthcare rates till after the proposed budget was released. But I think the most important thing that's impacting that number on the total appropriated budget this year is that there are debt service amounts for water and sewer utilities that were just finalized recently for a bond issue that's about to be issued, I believe, is next week. So that increase is a $2 million increase in debt service that we didn't have those final numbers when the proposed budget was released. But those numbers were included in the September 16th item that you all saw, and they were itemized as part of the agenda item. The general fund actually has gone down from the proposed budget. In the proposed budget, we had a general fund of $150.4 million. In the budget that you're considering tonight, the final numbers for the general fund is 148.3. So that's a reduction of about $2.1 million in the general fund budget. So the appropriated budget went up a little bit because of the debt service, but the general fund, which we've been concentrating mostly throughout this process, has actually gone down. Let me talk a little bit about the strategies that we are recommending to balance the budget. When the Commission reduced the millage rate to 0.5 mils on September 16th, we had to come up with a little over $1 million in cuts in the budget. And those are itemized in your agenda item, and I'll just go through them briefly. At September 16th, the Commission expressed concerns on some of the projects that were in the budget, mostly the facility studies for TPD, the Senior Center, the holiday lights for Cascades Park, as well as the smart parking meter project. We have removed those from the budget for a savings of about $275,000. Those are being funded from one-time revenues, so those will just revert back to capital funds to be utilized next year. There are a couple of one-time expenses that were still in the budget that we're recommending be moved out and be funded with that savings, specifically the radios related to the new police officers that are in the budget, as well as some training for staff related to our upgrade of our budgeting and financial systems. The other cuts that we've made, temporary wages have been reduced by $141,000. Mostly related to Parks and Recreation, since they are the ones that have most of the temporary wages budget. If you exclude Tallahassee Police Department, it's a 3% cut totaling $88,000. The total Parks and Rec temp wage budget is $2.8 million for next year, so we believe that that's a doable cut. And then there were also some temporary wages related to the former red light camera program that we went ahead and also reduced, even though they do have a backlog of citations that are still being reviewed. We believe that we left a little bit of money in there for them to be able to do that, but we did reduce about $52,000 in TPD's budget and temporary wages. There was a vacant position in Public Works that we've eliminated, and we can use that position to fund one of the other positions that have been added in the budget. And the biggest change that we've made, actually two more changes that we've made, as part of our overall budget balancing strategies presented September 16th, we had reduced the operating expenses in the general fund by about $665,000. We're recommending an additional $136,000 reduction in those accounts across the board in the general fund. So those expense accounts in totality will have been reduced $800,000, a little over $800,000 in the budget. And then the final cut that we're recommending is delaying vehicle replacements in the general fund, excluding Tallahassee Police Department. We are recommending a reduction of about $600,000 in the budget. Some of those vehicles will be delayed maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years, but we're recommending pushing those out in the budget. So those are all the adjustments, and those are itemized in your agenda item. The ordinance is based on those changes being made. The other issue that you all are aware that came up earlier this week is the COPS grant. And I wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about that and what our recommendation is related to funding those positions. We were awarded late Monday night, a COPS grant for 15 additional officer positions for a total grant amount of $1.8 million over the 3 years. We are required to keep those positions funded at 100% the city the fourth year. So the total match, the total amount that the city needs to put in over the 4 years is a little over $3.7 million. The grant covers about 33% of the positions over the 4 years. As I said, the first year cost in 2016 is about $1.8 million. The grant will be paying $711,000 of that, so that leaves a balance of a little over $1.1 million that we have to come up with to fund those positions in 2016. $755,000 of that is related to one-time costs. So the vehicles for these new officers, the uniforms, the radios, the computers that go in the vehicle, total $755,000. As those are one-time costs and not recurring, we're recommending utilizing the deficiencies fund to use those in the event that we have to purchase those early on next fiscal year. We know that we're recommending this to be a short-term strategy. We know that over the next 3 to 6 months, there are some potential land sales that the city is going to have that can replenish the deficiencies fund. We can reimburse back the amount that we used if we were to use it before those land sales come in. The actual recurring costs for the grant are $411,000. And we know that on October 1st, these positions will not be filled. So there will be savings not only in the 18 positions that the Commission is approving in the proposed budget, as well as I think they have 8 current vacancies as of today, plus these 15 positions. We know that those are going to take some time to fill and that there are going to be some savings in salary dollars related to those positions. We are recommending increasing the vacancy factor by 1%, which gives you about $420,000 in the budget to be able to offset some of these costs in 2016. And as we go into the 2017 budget next year, we'll start looking at strategies to make sure that we have recurring revenues to support these positions as we move forward. One important component of this grant is that we cannot supplant these revenues to fund the positions that have already been identified in the budget, and we have gotten verification of that from the Department of Justice. So with that being said, those are our recommendations. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Miller.
One question that I have is related to staffing. We have 8 positions open now. We've got the 18 that we added, and we've got another 15 that the grant is putting on the table, so to speak. So I'm not really quite clear how we're going to fill all those positions, given the fact that going into this year we had 12 vacancies before we even started talking about adding positions.
There'll be a process, obviously, and there will probably be, if you recall, the chief mentioned at his last induction ceremony that there was a class of students that would be coming out, I think he said actually in October. Is the chief here? Oh, all right, here he comes. And so that would be probably our first group coming out, and then we would be working on the second and possibly the third group. But let me ask him to answer that.
Yes, ma'am. It'll have to be done incrementally. We currently have 7 trainees in the academy right now. Okay. We have 82 applications that we're currently processing that have already passed the first round of testing, which is the initial screening, plus the written exam. So they're starting oral interviews, and then who pass that will continue in the background. Out of that 82, about 10 of them are actually in the academy right now, and some of them are slated to graduate in October, and some of them are scheduled to graduate either late November or early December. We really ramped up our recruiting. We just took a 3-day trip up to Atlanta and visited the colleges up there for recruiting fairs. We've done probably 5 recruiting trips in the last month and a half as far as being much more aggressive with our recruiting and expanding our efforts in that area, where in the past we took a much more passive approach. So all those positions are not going to get filled at one time, because we have to have the capacity too as far as the training and everything else. We could probably, right now, with our current capacities, about hire 20 at a time if we were able to fill positions. So at maximum, we'd have 2 different hiring classes I think it's 6 vacancies that we currently have. We have some people scheduled to retire, so we always have that normal attrition. But if we had a group of 15 to 20 in the next few months, plus then another 15 to 20 in the springtime.
Commissioner, I got a quick question. I'll go to Commissioner Ziffer. Raul, and maybe the chief, I'm not real sure, but if we maintain our commitment to trying to get closer to the 42 goal that you've identified by accepting this COPS grant, is there a way to hire the COPS grant officers first?
We can't freeze the 18 officers that they're considering adding to the budget right now, but we can do a simultaneous hiring, or we can do like a one-for-one match. We can't put all 18 on hold and just hire cops grant officers, but there is a
But a one-to-one match.
Gary Williams, my budget director, had a conversation with the cops office today, and we can implement both at the same time, and we can hire some people from the cops grant while we're hiring some people that are fully funded from the city at the same time. So there's a more gradual financial impact on the city.
Got it. Commissioner Ziffer, followed by Commissioner Miller,
Okay.
followed by Commissioner Maddox.
Without going into great detail, and I know the last graduating class are going to be great police officers for us, but we've talked about having classes that are more representative of our population.
Yes.
And I'm not sure about how the rest of this commission feels, but Chief, our next class, I hope that it is. That's one of the things that we're trying to do here, and I think all of us expect to see that occur. The other thing is, this is a question for Raul. Why wouldn't we, and you and I briefly talked about it, and I still feel fairly strongly about it, particularly after what the Chief just said, why wouldn't we memorialize in our budget that we're going to hire half the cops now and half the cops in the spring? And that way we would know exactly what our savings are or what our expenses are going to be. And I would feel more comfortable with that instead of just saying, well, we'll work it out later. Because that right now doesn't sit very well for me.
Yeah, if the commission decides to accept this grant today, we have a revised ordinance that actually increases the vacancy factor in the police department and reduces the budget by about $400,000. So not all the money will be there in 2016. So sort of getting at your point that we're delaying some of these hirings.
Well, why wouldn't we just say we're going to hire half now and half in April 1?
And we can do that too.
I would second that.
Commissioner Miller?
Well, I was going to ask you on the issue of the community policing, the fact that back to our original 18 officers, and this spills over to the 15 also, but I've been concerned all along that our officers are, you've explained to us that 80% of their time is spent answering calls and probably the rest of it writing reports about the calls they answered. And so I guess I'm looking for some experience in community policing somewhere. So are you actually out there recruiting some folks who are doing this type of police work in other communities and bringing that experience here to us? Because I think our current folks and now 15 other people who are hired just for this purpose need some level. It would be helpful to have some officers who had actually done this type of thing before they get to Tallahassee.
If we have the opportunity to steal talent from other agencies, we do it. In our previous class, we've done that. We've hired people away from FDLE. One of our new officers that's actually doing exceptional in our field training program, which is not a surprise. We actually hired from QSPD. So when we can steal talent from other agencies, we do have a lateral hire program where they're not hired at the entry rate, but they get a higher salary based on experience. So we do that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm specifically interested in this in the point of community policing.
Yes, ma'am. We've been doing a lot of community policing practices, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Maddox, followed by Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not concerned with your ability to do hiring, training, or community policing. Tallahassee Police Department is doing community policing for, 20 years, I would imagine. So I have no concerns about that. My concern is, and it's not a question, it's just a statement, the city manager's budget for police officers included a request for 18 officers, 2 investigators, and 16 officers. Had we known that we had a grant, a COPS grant in play for 15, we could have not put 18 in the budget. We could have put 2 investigators in the budget. If we got the COPS grant, we would have had, or 3, then we would have had the additional 15 paid for substantially in the match from the federal government. Since we didn't, what we have now is we're now discussing, how many is that? 33 officers, 33 personnel, where we've jumped, like we were talking about the 18 to the 33, like we'd been talking about the 33 all along. And tonight's the first night we've ever talked about the 33. So we were, day before yesterday, set and okay with 18 officers, 18 more personnel, the 2 investigators and the 16 officers. And today, we're discussing 30, 33, like we have to have them and have them on the street tomorrow. That's my problem with it.
May I address that, please?
You may, and then Commissioner Richardson.
Commissioners, first of all, let me apologize if any of you feel as though you did not have enough information about the COPS grant and the detail about it. But Commissioner Maddox actually was the commissioner who on April 7th or April 8th in one of our meetings indicated when we were talking, and again, there was a little bit of frustration going on there because we were talking about an early presentation of the chief's budget that we really weren't ready to talk about yet. And it had come out to the public on a radio show. And so we were kind of forced to have some of those conversations outside of the full budget. But during that period of time, and we were talking about the 42, 44 positions, the commission actually discussed the fact that there's no way that we could make that huge jump at that time. And you said specifically there are COPS grants that are out there and other things. We may do some in our budget because we want to be sure, and I'm not quoting you. We want to be sure that we have some in our budget. And we didn't know, first of all, we didn't know if we would get funded at all with the COPS grant. We didn't know how many officers would be funded out. You know, we were going to ask for 15, but we didn't know if they would approve all of them. So the timing of it was just a little bit, it probably seemed very strange. But again, there was never any indication that the commission did not wish for us to try to do more than the 18 police officers. And if there was some confusion about that, we certainly apologize, but we thought it was your indeed intention to try to get more officers than the 18, but using grant funds or other resources to do so.
Just on point, if I could.
Yes, Commissioner.
I'm fine with applying for the COPS grant. And in fact, what I suggested was for body cameras and the COPS grant. We got some information on that as well. And I'm all for leveraging federal dollars. I just, timing-wise, would have liked to have known that prior to our vote to put in the 18, that we'd applied and it was in consideration or some indication of, I don't know when we physically applied. Normally, when we apply for grants, they come to the commission, and we deal with them on consent. But we probably don't. I guess I know a lot of
some
Department of Justice.
Some we don't. Yeah, but because the commission has the opportunity to accept or not accept the grant if it is received.
So it'd be on the back end, right?
Yes.
The terms.
Yeah, it's just frustrating that I wish we would have known that we got the grant sooner, I guess.
Well, we wish too.
Yeah, Commissioner Maddox, and I know the rest of the commission as well, would have all agreed that we would have liked this information much sooner. And just by way of complete transparency, my first week as mayor, the week after the week we were all sworn in, I received a request from TPD, and I assumed that this was typical or customary for the office of the mayor to sign away the ability for them to apply for state and federal grants on a roving basis should they become available. There's nothing specific about the COPS grant, but the COPS grant was permitted as part of that clearance for them to go after funds, which I actually think we want them to go, not just them, every department within this government, to go after grant funding to the extent possible. And the way that I recall how we've dealt with this from time to time is if we should receive the award, that the terms of that agreement will come back to us for acceptance. And I think that's kind of where we are now, which is there's some terms out there. The timing clearly has not worked out great for us to learn of this in the same week that we're dealing with budget. But for me, it feels very much so like a positive in the sense that we know the chief has identified the need for 42. We know we could not get there on our own with this budget. And so the ability to pull down money that we send to D.C. to help us defray that cost, I think, is obviously worthy of our consideration, and it's a worthy conversation for us to be having. Obviously, probably worse when it comes to the timing of it. Commissioner Richardson, followed by Commissioner Miller, followed by Commissioner Ziffer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is a good problem to have, and I would rather have had it than not have it, because what that does is add 15 additional police officers that certainly we could not have budgeted for in our budget but for this grant. What does that mean for the larger community? And that's what we all should be talking about. We know what the situation is in our community. We've read the reports. We read the newspaper. This couldn't have come I don't think, at a more opportune time to address the issues, the crime issues, the violent crime issues that are occurring in our community. Rather than 18 officers within the next year, we potentially could put over 30 officers on the street. That means we have a safer community as a result. And so it's a good problem to have, and certainly one that we didn't expect at the time. But I think the staff the manager and her staff have come up with a plan, because my concern was how would we fund this? The portion that we have to fund in the 3 years, and certainly the full amount in the 4th year. And I'm comfortable at this point that a plan has been put in place that will accomplish that. But more important for me, we've talked about what the most basic role of government is, and that is to ensure the safety of its citizens. And we certainly will go a long ways towards ensuring that with the addition of these 30 or so officers. Now, I do have a question along the same lines as Commissioner Miller's, Chief, because I've had some to bring this to my attention. Certainly you don't just put officers on the street and they're adept at community policing. They have to understand what that philosophy is and how to implement it. So will there be training for in the concepts of community policing and what that actually means and how it's implemented once they're on patrol?
Yes, sir. Over the past year, we've brought in experts from the outside, and then we've been training everybody in the police department in two significant concepts. One is fair and impartial policing, and the other one is procedural justice. And that's actually being taught and trained to every employee, not just the officers, but our civilian support staff as well who interact with the public, to make sure that we are treating all people the way we're supposed to and interacting with people and building relationships and trust. And those core components are being implemented into our new hire program. So when new employees come in and new officers, that's through their in-service program and the field training program as well.
Okay. Thank you,
Chief, would you also please be sure that the Commission understands the expectations of the grant as it relates to the type of teams that should be hired? This would be a good time to explain that.
What we've done is, as part of the 15 officers, COPS grants are tied to programs. Traditionally, over the last 10, 15 years, if you just say you want patrol officers, they say that's nice, but no. Usually you have to identify areas of need. What we've done is, as part of our program and our narrative, we propose to create another bicycle squad, a community-oriented policing and problem-solving bicycle squad, so that way we would add a third squad. When I got here, we had one. We've increased it to 2 with existing personnel by kind of shaking out the building a little bit. It's my understanding in the past we actually had 4 in the city. So this will give us a third one, and the idea is that we'll have 2 separate bicycle squads on the south side that will split geographically to deal with long-term community issues. And they look at quality of life issues as well as crime issues, and they also interact and do everything from attend housing meetings and long-term projects like that. The other group of officers will be another violent crime response team. That's the 6 positions that you approved in last year's budget. By the time we get that up and running in about April, since then they've made between 60 and 70 gun and drug arrests, and they've seized about 50 or 60 guns over the last 6 months. The idea is, and their other component is they also do what's called custom notifications, which again is that community policing side of it, of trying to identify at-risk people and put them in touch with resources. So what this will do is they'll take that and it'll create a second squad, and we'll divide them geographically north and south, so that way they can continue to focus on the violent crime issues and quality of life issues from that standpoint, while the other officers that you approved, particularly the 16 and patrol officers, will be handling the traditional calls for service and hopefully allowing more time for the officers that people deal with every day to have more positive interactions.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Miller, followed by Commissioner Ziffer.
I would like to be notified when anybody applies for a grant. Just send a message to my office. Just routine message, and I believe this should be routine in general, and let us know. I don't know about anybody else. Maybe nobody else wants to get to that level of detail, but frankly, I would like to know when we apply for a grant, what the parameters are, and if possible, what our financial responsibilities are related to the acquisition of that particular grant.
So noted.
I agree. It's a substantial one, too.
So noted. Commissioner Ziffer.
Okay, so a couple of things. The other thing, and I appreciate what everybody's been saying, and it looks like we're going to have a lot more police, but the other thing we've also been saying is we're not going to be able to police our way out of this. We're not. And we had a process that we've been talking about now and that was presented to us where we're going to gradually bring police officers in. So all of a sudden we're really putting a lot of eggs in one basket. We are. We're making a commitment that this is going to be the way we're going to police our way out is to hire police. I'm not sure I totally agree with that. I'm probably going along with this, but we're about to put a lot of money and we're about to take money out of deficiencies fund and commit regular dollars towards something that at this point we're not totally convinced is going to solve the problem. But I'm willing to go along with that. So I'm going to do two things. The first thing I'm going to do is I would imagine we need to have a motion to accept the grant.
We would need a motion to accept the grant.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to accept the grant.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to accept the grant. Are there any other points on the grant piece? And City Attorney, I just want to clarify something. We can take up this grant piece at this time. Is that
Yes, you can, because the agenda item in the budget that is presented
depends on it.
assumes that the
Got
grant
it.
will be accepted.
Got it.
So, but there's a caveat to my motion to accept, and that is that, and so this is where it gets tricky with the budget, that we hire
1-to-1.
1-to-1, October 1, and the other half, April 1st.
Is there any objection by the seconder? Sounds appropriate.
In other words, instead of putting in our budget that we're going to hire all these new officers October 1st, we're saying that we're going to have a plan to effectively budget half of them October 1 and the other half, half of the grant, half of ours, on April 1st, 6 months later. That saves us money. It memorializes a savings of dollars.
Sure it
All
does.
right, so just
Commissioner Miller, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. So my understanding is that your motion says that we're going to open the door to hiring half the COPS grants and half the COPS and half the originally programmed COPS on October 1st and the other half of each in April. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And that would do we want to hire both investigators now? Do you need both investigators now?
Well, what we'll do is we'll hire the 8 out of that half, and we'll hire the 8 cop squad for the bicycle unit, so that way
Yes.
I have one unit up and running.
That'd be great.
And then what I'll do is we'll take a look at that 8. The priority first is patrol work. So ideally, those 8 officers will first be placed on patrol because that's our basic core service where we're falling behind. If you would give me the latitude to hire the 2 additional to put the 2 people in investigations to address follow-up crimes with investigations,
Yeah, I think we need that now.
I would appreciate that.
I think we need that.
But
I think the maker of the motion accepted that as
Yes.
as a change to the motion. If there's any unclarity, please say so now. Otherwise, all those in favor of it?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller, yes.
The funding piece, not clear exactly how that plays into this particular motion.
Raul, can you just, if I understand it correctly, it is a phasing of the money that would be required. And what Raul has identified is in salary costs that are non-one-time, there's about $400,000 associated with it. But based off your motion, it sounds like that may be less depending upon the scheduling of the hires.
And the other part to that is we won't be having as much out-of-pocket expense
Absolutely.
for equipment and vehicles and such because we're waiting until April to do that as well.
Right.
So I'm not sure what that exact dollar savings is, but it sounded like we're pulling out of deficiencies anyways, so we'll have to pull less out and replenish less.
Right.
So that works for me too.
Correct.
Yeah.
Commissioner Miller.
My particular point is that I'm not ready to vote tonight to put to give you the authorization to take $1.2 million out of deficiencies tonight. And so how you can marry that to the plan that Commissioner Ziffer has we discussed this, we talked about the possibility that, so I guess what I'm saying here is that we may vote to allow you to hire all these people, but you're going to draw down deficiencies as needed. You don't just get carte blanche tonight for $1.2 million access to deficiencies.
The deficiency amount is only $755, not the 1.2.
Well, that's good to know.
Right. Yeah.
And also,
we would bring that.
understand?
Yeah, we would bring that back to the commission at the time that we have to approve the purchasing of the vehicles, whether it's from deficiencies fund or other sources. But for the budget purpose, we need to appropriate the $755 from the deficiencies fund, because whether you buy your cars on October 1st or you buy the cars on April 1st, it's still going to cost the same amount.
Yeah.
Understand.
Okay.
All right. Commissioners, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously. Back to the budget.
Back to the
Thank you,
budget.
Commissioners.
Mayor and Commissioners, there are certain things I need to read into the record, and then we'll take public comment on the millage rate and also on the proposed budget of both the city and the Downtown Improvement Authority. And then once you've heard all the public comment before you vote on the budget, you'll be plenty of time to discuss any of those particular items. This is the second and final public hearing on the fiscal year 2016 budget. The final hearing was advertised in the Tallahassee Democrat on Monday, September 21st, 2015. Neither the date of the first hearing, September 16th, nor today's date conflicts with any county commission or school board meeting hearing dates. Again, I need to read the following in the record. And following along, this is in the agenda item of paragraph number 1. The proposed final millage rate for fiscal year 2016, as tentatively set at the last meeting, is 4.2000 for the city of Tallahassee and 1.00 for the Downtown Improvement Authority, which exceeds the aggregate rollback rate of 3.6556 by 15.46%. The increase in ad valorem tax revenue of approximately $6.3 million is necessary to fund ongoing governmental operations, a majority of which is for public safety. Attached to the agenda item is resolution number 15-R-38AA, that's as amended, which states the resolution form the percentage that the final rate exceeds the rollback rate. Now it's time for the public to speak on the city's millage rate and the proposed city budget.
Mayor, we have a number of speakers. The first speaker is Dottie McPherson. I'll ask speakers to come to the microphone to my right, your left, right there in front of Ms. McPherson. Each speaker will have 3 minutes for your comments. We would appreciate it if you would give your name and address for the record. There is a light that's just to the left of where your hand is. Should come on there. It'll be green, and it'll turn yellow and then red, but I'll also let you know when the 3 minutes has expired. Following Ms. McPherson will be Erwin Jackson.
Dottie McPherson, 24236 Lanier Street, Tallahassee, Florida, 32310. Good evening, Commissioners. Landlords and businesses pass on tax increases to their tenants and customers, meaning less money for families. The city budget adjusts for new employee health care rates at 6.16% increase. Because of Obamacare, insurance companies in our nation are requesting rate increases for 2016, with one request at 58% increase. One man reported he'll pay a $700 a month insurance premium with a $5,000 deductible before he and his wife will benefit from his required insurance plan. How much will it cost each family in Tallahassee with even half of that rate increase? We'll have a property tax increase and we'll pay more for premiums, deductibles, and copays for insurance in 2016. People will move away and take their money with them, or will shop in nearby communities where goods and services are cheaper. Cause business to fail and people to lose their jobs, and you'll see more crime. Then we'll need more law enforcement for sure. Instead of causing more crime, stop crime now. The federal government is trying to give us money that all but one of you didn't know about, and after learning about it, you made excuses for not taking it, asking what to do after it's gone. We'll be saddled with new employees and continuing expenses. Maybe you should think about hiring are moving city funds to enable hiring on a contract basis or on a temporary basis for the term of the federal grant, and use a special crime unit to catch hardened criminals and to stop organized crime in our community. Just think out of the box. That might go a long way to reducing long-term need for more law enforcement. How long does it take to mow a few acres of grass at Cascades Park and trim a few bushes? It certainly will not take 160 hours a month for a full-time employee. Why are you paying overtime pay for Parks and Rec because of the demands of evening activities? Avoid time and a half by hiring part-time employees for those activities. Then you don't have to provide insurance and all other benefits of full-timers. Give somebody else a job, even at half-time. Before increasing taxes, conduct policy and program analyses on every program funded by the city. Reorganize or cut programs that are not cost-efficient nor cost-effective. When is the last time you did such an analysis? Determine whether the city should be in the airport, utility, city transit, or any business that would be better run by private enterprise that uses profit motive to keep costs down. Stop your runaway spending. Specifically, stop piling more money onto the previous year's budget without accountability. Start using zero-based budgeting and save taxpayers' dollars. Critical audits and critics question misspent taxpayers' money, mismanagement of our city's financial resources, and overstep bounds of authorities with programs, policies, and activities that should be left to private enterprise. Do something about it instead of penalizing taxpayers. The city has thousands of new apartments and condos just for college students, has spent grant money to remove blight from neighborhoods and benefits from rising property values, all meaning increased tax revenues. You recently accrued new money from local and state revenue shared taxes and from new local gas tax increase. Your runaway spending must cease. Cut your own budget like we have to do to survive. We've lost shopping malls and businesses. They're boarded up all over town.
Excuse me, your time has expired. Thank you.
No more excuses.
Next speaker, Mayor, is Erwin Jackson, and then we'll hear from Michael Rosenthal.
Dr. Erwin Jackson, 1341 Jackson Bluff. The city's proposed property tax increase can only be described as a financial rape of every Tallahassee resident in general and each business owner in particular. The city told us they needed 27% increase, but now will settle for only 13% for this year. They will be back later for the balance. Some commissioners even said they believe the public is upset because we're confused. The communication was poor. As a local businessman, I clearly heard the message from this commission, and I know the devastation that such an increase will have on local businesses. Let's look at several of the important reasons for this city, why the city needs this huge tax increase. We need to increase the lobbying contract by $40,000 to Sean Pittman, Andrew Gillum's campaign manager. Andrew, it's important that you pay your campaign manager, but not with taxpayer money. We need to pay $2.5 million spent to build a bar for Adam Corey, Andrew Gillum's campaign treasurer. Is building bars in Tallahassee really a top priority for this city government? And our mayor just can't operate without 3 more interns. Just maybe if the mayor gave up his full-time job in Washington and could run his office here, he wouldn't need to have 3 more interns. I spent 4 years speaking for this commission, exposing the self-serving actions of John Marks, Honeywell, ADE, Deferred Comp, and I am saddened that the faces have changed, but the crony capitalism continues in the mayor's office. I saw earlier this evening ex-commissioner Debbie Lightsey. I hope she's here to return the $100,000 in deferred comp, and I would hope that the mayor would do the same, his $100,000 in deferred comp that was scammed from the public. Several business owners have asked me, what am I going to do regarding this massive tax increase? My answer is very simple. I'm taking my money and I'm investing in other communities. 2 weeks ago, I purchased an RV park in Lake City. I hired 4 new employees. They're thankful to have the job, and I was glad to help provide them. And guess what? There's no discussion of a property tax increase. Some communities do live within their means. I pity our Chamber of Commerce, who's trying to recruit new businesses to our community, and they must explain that a 27% tax increase is really good for our business. I certainly don't expect reason and facts to persuade this commission to eliminate this foolish and harmful tax. As adults, if you have not figured out that it is a small business that creates jobs for our citizens and that excessive taxes will destroy a robust economy. Therefore, I'm going to save my breath. I'm going to spend my time looking for additional investments in other communities. Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Michael Rosenthal, and then Curtis Baines.
Hello, my name is Michael Rosenthal at 4045 Kilmartin Drive. I'd like to thank Mr. Maddox for opposing this property tax increase. He's the only commissioner showing any respect for the taxpayers of Tallahassee. And thank you for rooting out waste in the local city government. Mr. Maddox, I realize that you were not on the city commission when the city spent $127 million on overpriced fuel hedges that expired worthless, and spent $40 million on smart meters. So rather than attacking me, you should be attacking the other commissioners for making the dumb decision to spend $167 million that serve no purpose. You agree that they are mismanaging the city, so please attack them. Mrs. Miller, you mentioned that the city tax increase is small in the overall tax bill, but taxpayers are being hammered on all sides. The city raised the millage rate about 7 years ago. The school board raised the millage rate 2 times in the last few years. The county just raised the gas tax a nickel a couple of years ago. No government has used the rollback millage rate to lower our tax rates. Mr. Beach said that we need to raise taxes because of population growth, but the property taxes and sales taxes are perfectly indexed for population growth and inflation. So this shows that there is no need for a property tax increase. Last year I reported that the city employees' salaries went up 18.5% since 2008, while median family income only went up 4.18%. And no one else in the community reported on this, no television station, radio station, or newspaper. I also reported that the sales tax revenue went up twice as much statewide, or more than twice as much statewide than as the local collections, showing that your policies are hurting the local economy. And again, this was not reported by anybody else. Citizens are in the dark, and they would be outraged if they knew about this. And while I attack the city, I do not mean to attack city employees. They would just make better employees in the private sector. Government is incompetent by its nature. There are no feedback mechanisms like there are in the private sector. Private sector companies are constantly trying to improve their product and deliver lower prices. And many are not successful, and they go into bankruptcy or lose market share. And consumers have a choice. But when government fails, they just raise taxes. Mr. Gillum has a perfect solution for our problems. Privatize government. He mentioned spinning off the electric utility the other day, but why stop there? Spin off all the departments you can. I call on all the commissioners to reject this outrageous tax increase. And I also wish that the citizens of Tallahassee spent as much attention following local government as they do FSU football.
Excuse me, your time has expired.
Although I would not want more drunk people in this chamber. Already,
excuse me, your time has expired.
There are too many people in this chamber with impaired judgment. Thank you.
Curtis Baines, followed by Sandy Beck.
All right. Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. Curtis Baines, 1323 East Tennessee Street. I had prepared some thoughts for this meeting, but sitting here earlier, watching you, I had recalled some of the comments I had read recently about commissioners who are disappointed or frustrated with the process, the budget process, that sort of thing. And as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, well, now you just voted to hire 13 new police officers, accept a grant for 18 new police officers, and we're still sitting here waiting to speak. Now, I'm concerned that the problem with the process is at least three of you five right there. This is not the time in your budget, it seems to me, to try to make individual policy decisions. You make the policy decision, then try to fund it, is the way I always thought it would work. The legislature cannot make policy in their budget. They have been reversed time and again trying to make policy in the budget document. That's not what the budget document is for. It's to try to figure out how to finance what policies you've adopted. And tonight, you've jumped over all of that and decided to hire, one new police officer for every one you hire under the COPS program. I think some of the commissioners have made correct observations. Hiring more police officers isn't going to deal with your crime issue. In 2014, you had around 10,800 indexed offenses, according to the Uniform Crime Report. That's major crimes that I consider, murder, rape, robbery, larceny, those things that we typically associate with being unsafe. 10 years ago, you had around 10,100. Not traumatic or significantly different. So, yes, your crimes have increased from 2013 to 2014, but based upon a single year's increase should not drive us to dramatically increasing our law enforcement agents to the extent that you did earlier this evening. Now, I realize that nothing we say this evening is really going to affect anything you've done because you've pretty much almost done it. This is not an economy, and it hasn't been for 10 years, that supports hiring 40 or 45 or 50 or 60 new employees, giving everybody raises. I'm a former state employee, I understand. Budgets are balanced on the backs of public employees. I hate that that's the case, but that's the way it is. And the economy is not doing so well that it can support this kind of thing. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Sandy Beck. And I believe she's requested some assistance with the, to be able to show a document. I don't know if we have someone. Yes, we do. We have someone coming to do just that.
And who's following?
Following Ms. Beck is Pat Simmons.
Thank you, Raul.
Can we come back to her in a minute? We'll see if we can get somebody to find the computer.
We'll go to Miss Simmons.
Pat Simmons
Pat
is
Simmons.
next.
Well, actually, Sandy was part A and I was part B.
Oh, well, let's, if you'd like, we can go to maybe the next one, and then we'll come back when we get that fixed. Thank you for
Caitlin
your
White would be next. Caitlin White.
first name.
Caitlin
White.
My name is Caitlin White, 3727 Suter Court. I see tonight that I am represent a different demographic that is against this tax increase. I'm a low-income, part-time worker, full-time student at Florida State University, and I happen to own a home here in Tallahassee. I believe this tax increase is unnecessary and detrimental to our recovering economy. I'm not going to nitpick what I think is frivolous spending in the proposed budget. Instead, I'm going to tell you why I think this increase is excessive. Contrary to what the city manager would have you believe, Tallahassee can continue to function with a high standard of living with zero property tax increase. In the 6 to 8 years while we have been in a recession and now a recovery period, the city of Tallahassee has built Cascades Park with a price tag of over $30 million, a $2.1 million taxpayer-subsidized restaurant, the Edison. The pedestrian bridge was also approved and has started construction. It was originally estimated at $2.5 million, and then it skyrocketed to a price of somewhere between $5 million and $6 million in March. And in June, the projected cost was once again increased to $7.2 million. On top of these projects, roads have continued to be maintained. We've added the pedestrian bridge at Lafayette Heritage Park. Sidewalks have been added in areas like Bradford Road and Centerville Road. The airport is undergoing improvements, and storm drains have been added throughout the city. These are projects that have been approved and executed while we've been in a recession. Taxpayers have already rallied behind an $800 million 20-year extension of the penny sales tax. And on October 1st, the fire service fee has a 26.9% increase for residential homeowners. Increasing the property tax is simply put unnecessary. As you can see from my perspective, Tallahassee has been thriving without a tax increase during our recovery from the recession. In the budget letter sent to the City Commission from the City Manager, she concludes by saying, "We cannot cut our way to greatness." However, the projects I've just highlighted tonight are just some of the examples of Tallahassee's greatness during a time of cutbacks. Tallahassee, the great city I'm proud to call my home, has been thriving without this increase. On another note, Mayor Gillum, you specifically requested the City Manager and staff to present a budget that included no increase, and they ignored that request. The City Manager would like you to think that the city is between a rock and a hard place, which is why the request was ignored. The originally proposed 27% increase was a tactic used to make the 13% compromise look like a deal. Unfortunately, this isn't a deal. The increase will hit low-income and fixed-income individuals like myself, who happen to own homes, the hardest. It will take money out of our economy, which will hurt small business owners that provide people like me with jobs. Our city has been fortunate enough to make it through the recession and be one of the few that has thrived. Let's not cripple all the progress we've made by increasing property taxes and add more of a burden to homeowners and business owners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we ready?
Checking to see if our tech team has us ready to roll.
Mayor, could I make a comment?
Yes, please, Commissioner Miller.
First of all, I wanted to tell you to thank you for coming, and you are one of the most well-informed folks that we've had to visit us on any topic. But I thought it was important to address one thing that has come up over and over, not just from you, but from others. The citizens of this community were wise enough to pass a sales tax in 2000 that would pay for things like Cascades Park and the bridge and FAMU, all of that. Now, because we are a blessed community, that money just began to get to the point where we were digging in the dirt during the recession, and that really did a wonderful service to this community to tide us over during that time. But those projects were not, I would love to claim credit for those as city, but they were not city projects. And no, they were not city projects. They were totally blueprint projects. They were Cascades Park is completely a blueprint project that was on that referendum list. The beauty of blueprint is that there was a list presented to voters, and then again last year, and then the money comes in from that penny sales tax to the blueprint agency, and then it is spent for those projects. It's worked beautifully, and it's done wonders for our community, but we here can't claim credit because we didn't have, the only part we had was to endorse the list, essentially. So other than that, phenomenal set of facts, and I have a great deal of respect for you. We have heard you. I wanted to bring attention to the trim notice and ask you to study your trim notice and see the impact that it will have on you on the city portion only. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are we nearly ready, or should we go to the next?
I can do that. Okay, I'll do that. I'll flip it over for you. You'll see them also on the screen right above you if you want to do it that way.
Sorry, buddy.
Can anybody tell a good joke?
We've heard plenty.
Okay. We're punting here.
Okay. Welcome, Ms. Beck, I believe. Are you Sandy Beck?
My name is Sandy Beck. I live at 1521 Fuller Road in Tallahassee, 32303. Now for something totally different. I'm the education director with St. Francis Wildlife. I know that you are all familiar with St. Francis Wildlife, and thank you for letting me speak. But St. Francis Wildlife, this should be up on your screen now. Mm-hmm. We're a nonprofit, a local 501c3 organization. We were founded in 1978 to provide humane care and rehabilitation for orphan, injured, and sick wildlife in North Florida, and public education for our community. Each year, we rescue and care for approximately 3,000 animals. from tiny little hummingbirds up to alligators, white-tailed deer, foxes, and 1/2 of those animals come from within city limits. So that's approximately 1,500. We have a 3,600 square foot wildlife hospital that's located on 35 acres in Havana. We respond to rescue calls 24/7. Citizens can also drop off wildlife to us at 3 different veterinary clinics in Tallahassee. For many years, it was just 1, and now we have 2. And Dr. Mitch Potter, he's from Allied Veterinary Hospital. He's with us today. And also Northwood Animal Hospital. Many of you are familiar. So it's even more convenient for citizens to bring wildlife to us. We also respond to dozens of calls and emails every day from citizens who are asking for help with resolving problems with wildlife in their own backyards and parks and neighborhoods. Each year we also present more than 75 wildlife education programs in local classrooms and at organizations and events. This is a screenshot from your own website, the city website. You refer people with wildlife questions and problems to St. Francis Wildlife. Keep going. Now for some cute pictures. We rescued recently this gray fox, which is a rabies vector. I'm not saying he had rabies, but of course foxes are rabies vectors. We rescued it from a drainage ditch at Cascades Park. We know you don't want citizens rescuing rabies vectors.
Excuse me, your 3 minutes have expired.
Wow, that was fast.
Can't cut off a baby possum.
You're going to miss all the cute pictures.
You have to pass them out to us.
But could I just show you the last slide?
Sure.
Okay. We have, so you get the idea, lots of animals. Since 1996, the city has recognized our unique the service that we provide. And the city has provided funding to us for the last 19 years. The chart you see there is the funding that we've received for the last 10 years. All of a sudden last year, the rug was pulled out from under us. We weren't given any notice. That's a big chunk of our budget. And we're operating on a shoestring, and this shoestring is starting to fray. So that's my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Mack. Commissioner Ziffer.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure if anybody else got this, but I got this email from Sandy back on the 21st of September, which has been since our last meeting. And I'm going to have a recommendation how we may deal with this, just so.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. I believe we're now.
Next would be Pat Simmons.
I don't need that high-tech stuff, thank you. My name is Pat Simmons. I live at 3128 O'Brien Drive, Tallahassee, Florida. And I, too, am speaking on behalf of St. Francis Wildlife. Sandy's already said that since 1996, the city has been funding St. Francis Wildlife. And in 2014, I'll just give you a quick rundown of the last 2 years. In 2014, funding was removed with no warning to our board of directors. When asked what prompted the change, the board was initially informed that the city lacks the funds to continue. And then concerns about St. Francis Wildlife's animal rescues within the city were raised. Our board was not provided the opportunity to investigate and address any of these alleged issues. However, in an effort to continue to improve our services, the board made changes to our rescue program, including hiring new staff and, as Sandy said, procuring additional drop-off clinic locations. City staff was informed of these changes in March of 2015 with no response back. We learned that another agency may have received our funds to pay for spay and neuter programs. And if this is correct, we would like to have the Commission explain why a respected agency that you've done business with since 1996, St. Francis Wildlife, was cut off without personal regard. A formal request for reinstatement was sent to Mr. Beach in February of 2015, and we have not received a response. 2 board members from St. Francis and our educator spoke with city staff in March of 2015 about inclusion in the FY16 budget. They left the meeting understanding our request would at least be relayed to the commission. Even after a follow-up letter to staff, we have not heard back. A letter to the commission, which I think was just referenced, was sent to the city in August of 2015. As of this date, we have not received any response. We know the budget process has been brutal, but we haven't received any responses over this period of time. We deal with animals that the city animal shelter is not trained to handle. We do deal with other wildlife agencies that are local, but they cannot handle the volume of St. Francis Wildlife. In addition to the hundreds of birds, reptiles, and mammals we receive from within the city, we are also an adjunct service to Leon County for the handling and disposal of non-exposure rabies vectors throughout the county. We also pick up wild animals suspected to be ill with parvovirus or distemper, both of which are infectious diseases to other wildlife, feral animals, and pets. This service alone costs more than the $35,000 we lost in 2015. And we offer information and educational services via presentations, phone, email, and social media to hundreds of people that other wildlife agencies do not provide. Reporting numbers to city staff can be done if you wish. It may help you understand our services further. St. Francis would like to respectfully ask that the Commission find a way to include St. Francis in the FY16 budget so we can continue the level of quality service Tallahasseans have come to depend upon and expect. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Sarah Teresa Haskell, followed by Brent Pichard.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Sarah Teresa Haskell. I reside at 923 Alachua Avenue. Bear with me, I'm not a speaker. Last week I was unprepared to speak. I came wanting someone else to present the many concerns I have been hearing. There are many Tallahassee citizens who are upset at the proposed property tax increase. Everyone thinks someone else is going to speak up, and that's where I was last week. This time I am better prepared to present my concerns in opposition for the proposed property taxes. Tallahassee has a large portion of untaxable land. We have churches, state government, we have Florida State, FAMU, TCC. That leaves a much smaller land base for taxation. Your property owners are committed. This property tax would penalize the people who have committed to be a homeowner, a business owner, and or a landowner. These people have helped build this wonderful city. There is a commercial that presents that studies show people that own property develop positive characteristics, their children do better in schools, they take pride in what is theirs, they take better care of what is theirs. On one hand, you are encouraging new and young people to pull together money to commit to purchase a home, and then putting an added burden of heavy taxes which can take their home away. Your property owner is hardworking. This proposed property tax sends a bad message. You're saying their hard work and commitment don't matter. The property taxes are already a tremendous burden for many. Any additional property tax is wrong. You should make an effort to work within the budget. The city is like a family. A family has a budget. You only spend what you have. That means when times are hard, you must prioritize what is most important and work down from there. Right now, I know crime and citizen safety have moved high on the priority list. I am for this. I really am. What you have to do is get rid of non-essential things, and I'm saying this not hearing what was said earlier, like Cascade Park Addition, Governor's Walk, or awards. Those are nice things, but not necessities. In a family, if your house needs a new roof, or your car goes out, or your child is going to college, you don't take an optional vacation, you don't decorate your house, you don't splurge on things you cannot afford to do. Good choices have to be made. Property owners will feel let down if bad choices are made. It would be good for property owners to see that the burden of taxes are being shared by all citizens of the community.
Excuse me, your 3 minutes have expired.
Okay, can I just do my closing then? Your property owners have endurance. They are here for the long haul. We will continue to be committed, work hard, and keep our pride, and work with you. We need you to hear us. Property taxes should not be raised.
Thank you. Next speaker is Brent Pichard, and then he'll be followed by Gary Cherry.
Need to put a red light camera on this warning because we'd have had 3 tickets here already tonight. Brent Pichard, 2211 Ellicott Drive, Tallahassee. These 3 minutes are dedicated to just 3 individuals in this room tonight. First of all, to Commissioner Scott Maddox. I too wish to thank you for your unwavering stand against this millage rate increase. May your kind multiply on planet Earth.
He already has. He's got 2 sons.
Secondly, to the 2 most powerful individuals, in my view, in this room tonight, and that would be Commissioner Nancy Miller and Commissioner Gil Ziffer. We are asking you to do the unexpected, the shocking. Until the city's financial house is in order, use your power to stop this out of control and frankly embarrassing budgeting process. There are 3 compelling reasons why a bold move like this, even at this late date, makes economic and political sense. Reason number 1, Budget Hawks, Citizens for Responsible Spending, and Tallahassee Reports have clearly illuminated the waste and inefficiencies in city government. This $750 million budget is literally dripping with dollars that are wasted, inefficiently employed, and misappropriated. We have grant money coming in that most of you didn't even know about, which has already been discussed tonight. Every one of these lost, wandering dollars should be meticulously accounted for before any increase is even contemplated. That's just good business. That's just good common sense. Reason number 2, there are 58,000 parcels of taxable real estate in the city, with about 5,000 of those being commercial properties. Every one of those property owners will pay the proposed tax increase not once, but twice. Once on the properties they own, and again as consumers, because business owners will pass their tax increases on to their customers in the form of higher rents and higher prices at the beauty salon, the grocery store, the restaurant, and the movie theater. And reason number 3, there are about 2,800 city employees, and granted, they are your constituents too. If we assume for purposes of illustration that all 2,800 city employees from the manager on down are urging you to vote a tax increase, what weight should you give to the 2,800 relative to the owners of 58,000 parcels of real estate? Commissioners Miller, Ziffer, and Maddox, I urge you to use your power tonight to benefit all 187,000 citizens of Tallahassee. Rein in this runaway staff. Remind them who works for whom. Get the city's house in order first by driving 3 wooden stakes through the heart of this tax increase.
Next speaker is Gary Cherry, followed by Mitch Potter.
Chopped liver?
My name is Gary Cherry, reside at 9036 Muirfield Court in Tallahassee. I'm representing the Capital City Apartment Association. As I indicated last week, and I'm not going to change my spiel very much, we feel that this tax increase is one that some of our owners will be able to pass along through increased rents, some will not. Those that do not will end up with maintenance issues and other things. All of this will depend upon the strength of their financial capabilities and the location and management of their properties. That's point number 1. Point number 2, which has been echoed by many of the people here, is it's very clear that there's a big perception that you have not spent the time to really look at the budget and trim out the fat that may or may not be there. A lot of it depends at the level that you want to operate, but you can go to Budget 8 or you can go to the Ritz-Carlton. Some of the impression is we do a lot of Ritz-Carlton. And that's my spiel. Let's get the budget into the form that it should be. Thank you.
Next speaker is Mitch Potter, and then John Lester.
Thank you. I'm Mitch Potter, 7983 Locknall Lane in Tallahassee. I'm a veterinarian here in town at Allied Veterinary Emergency Hospital, and I'm speaking on behalf of St. Francis Wildlife. One of the things that just as a veterinarian I wanted to share is that we know what they do in terms of animal care at St. Francis. The other big benefit that's provided by an organization like this is the public health. Certainly something that I think probably most people in Tallahassee would expect is that there is a resource available that's looking out for zoonotic disease that can be spread from animals to people. Oftentimes that comes from wildlife, and the rehabilitators and the staff at St. Francis are trained to recognize those things and then respond, and they do that, and they do a great job of it. They educate the public as well on how to handle these wild animals. It's obviously a lot different than having a dog or a cat, although a lot of times people don't understand that. And so the education that they provide is a valuable thing. The animal care that they provide is really unique, and we have qualified, effective care for native wildlife here in our city, and that's not something you find everywhere, and it should be valued. The other thing that they do is they support the public agency. So there really is no public agency that does what St. Francis does, but it is a service that citizens expect. And I did notice, Commissioner Richardson, you mentioned ensuring the safety of citizens, and that I think is one of the most important things that St. Francis can do. They can add a layer of safety to the citizens of Tallahassee, and that's why we would ask to be included in the budget this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is John Lester. He'll be followed by Russell Price. And Mr. Mayor, Mr. Price is the last speaker that I have, so if there are other speakers, they need to fill out a form pretty quickly.
John Lester, 2752 West Hannon Hill Drive. I had no intention of speaking tonight. I only came to listen. But I'm just simply stunned by what seems to me the lack of foresight on the commission on dealing with something just like this COPS grant issue. Everybody acts like that's free money, and all we have to do is put a few dollars with it, and hey, we have all these new officers. What happens when the grant ends? All of that 15 officers or 18, however many it was, is you either have to let those people go after 3 years, or you have to lay the tax on, or you're going to have to cut other parts of the budget. And it seems to me that that's indicative of the lack of foresight that is demonstrated in this budget process and the tax increase. And I urge you to reject the grant, reject the tax increase, and clarify your budget process. Thank you.
Russell Price, and that's our last speaker, Mayor.
Thank you.
Russell Price, representing Budget Hogs. My nest is at 5375 Pembridge Place. I know you're not supposed to enter into a dialogue with the commission, but I just have some rhetorical questions that hopefully you can answer during the discussion time. It's my understanding that we're hiring the new police positions with the grant money. Will the new positions, all the new positions, fall under the collective bargaining contract, and therefore be eligible for higher than general employee raises and step up salary increases? I think those averages about 6.5 or 7%. That's one question. The second question, observation is, we spend time. You cut the Christmas decorations $25,000 for the park, but you have not addressed overtime at all. For 2016, there's $8 million budgeted for overtime. A good portion of that is in the police department. We're hiring 33 officers now, it looks like. So I assume that the 1.5 to 2 million overtime should be coming down, but I hadn't heard anybody say that, and I'd like to know what that is. Another question is regarding part-time employees. I've started asking when this process started if someone could tell us how many part-time employees we have. The Florida League of Cities website says that when we fill out our questionnaire, we have 1,196 part-time employees, which is twice as high as the next highest city in Florida. So I'd like to know, does anyone in this room know how many part-time employees we have? Human Relations HR head says that we paid over 700 part-time employees the last pay period, but no one seems to know what that number is. I'd love to hear what that number is, and if there's any additional cutting that can be made there. And then summarize, in conclusion, I'd like to ask this. At the budget workshop, there were at least 3 commissioners who favored not hiring, postponing hiring the horticulturalist and the other 3.5 positions. Somehow they've come back into the budget. I think they're still there now. You also voted at the workshop not to have body cameras. Somehow that came back, but it's...
Excuse me, your time's expired.
I'd just like to know how that happened. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, we have had another speaker form provided. That is Elizabeth Winchester. I'm told there might be another form coming this way, but I haven't seen it yet.
Hello.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Thanks for allowing me to jump in here at the last minute. I just planned to come and observe, as the gentleman earlier indicated. I just wanted to speak. I'm not a member of the budget hawk group. I'm not a fiscal conservative. I'm a social progressive. So I don't belong to any groups here, but I just wanted to speak as a homeowner that it's been, I guess I've just been surprised that that there was such a significant jump indicated for the homeowner's properties tax. And I just would like, I guess, as people indicated earlier, I just would hope that there would be more thought given to that. I'm also really a big fan of Cascades Park. I think it's beautiful. I love it. But as people were saying, I think the bottom line is balance. And one of the things I love about Tallahassee, because this is my hometown, is we do have a lot of, we have a lot of features here like the parks and the trees and the birds, and we're more animal friendly, I think, than some other places. But it does seem like the process for, the homeowner property tax increase just wasn't well thought out, and I just would like to, I'm just hoping that y'all will give that some more thought in the future as a homeowner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask you a quick question? What is your impression of what the increase will be? What percentage of property tax?
Well, I only paid attention since the meeting last Tuesday.
Okay.
So I know that it was going to be something in the neighborhood of, it was going to be like 27.5%. I know that y'all said that you were going to go down to like half of that, I believe. Okay. So that's my understanding of where it is now. It's not so much the number, it's just the process. The process. And I think Mr. Maddox indicated last week about giving some thought to what the expenses are and what we really need to spend prior to spending it. So that's my thought on that.
Well, the only thing that I would correct you on,
Okay.
and I certainly appreciate you coming tonight, is I'm a property owner. I have a family. I certainly have given a lot of thought to what we're doing. I don't want you to think, or I would not want you to leave here tonight thinking that we are not impacted by any of what we do. We are. We pay taxes like any other property owner, and we have all wrestled with this. We've given it considerable thought and to arrive at where we are. So please don't leave here tonight thinking that we have just rushed to come up with this proposal and have not given thought to homeowners, property owners in our community, our business community. We have done all of that.
What you mentioned just made me think of one more little thing I'd like to throw in there. As much as I love the appearance of all the building down in the FSU area, I think it's called College Town now. Again, I wasn't really paying close attention to all the meetings, and I'm sure it was discussed at some point in time how many multi-units were going to be built. But for the life of me, I just don't see where there's the need for all of that. And I know I heard a multi-unit building owner speak at last week's meeting about how her rents had been affected. And one of the things I've done as a homeowner is I've rented out rooms in my home, and it's really negatively affected me in particular this year. Normally I have 3 rooms rented, now I have 1. And it seems like it's hit a lot of people that live here and have been here for a very long time significantly, especially in this past year. And yet I think one of the construction companies I saw knocking buildings down sometime in the last few months was Winter Park Construction Company, which isn't a local company. And I don't know what taxes they're paying. I don't know what taxes the students are paying, but it just does seem like some people mentioned in the last meeting that a lot of it is being put on us, the local homeowners, and you. And, so just that it could be spread out a little better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we do have another speaker, Steve Stewart.
I almost got out of here without talking. Steve Stewart, 3048 Waterford Drive. Just a couple of clarifications. And we have a number of people that speak come out and haven't followed the process the whole way. And I think a couple of things that are coming across is that people are saying that the budget process is broken, and there are things that get brought up, and we talk about it in the media. Sean Rossman wrote a great article today about how a department here is operating at probably 3 times what the department is across the street compared to other cities. Great article. I wrote an article about how the mayor's expenses is 3 times 7 cities that we compared it to. And he gets no acknowledgement up here. It's like and with all due respect, Commissioner Richardson, to say that we've looked and turned every stone is just really not the case. And so when people come up here and we say that, and we understand you're a homeowner, we hear about, well, this is only $8 a month. Well, then there's nothing talked about in terms of the fire service fee, which is another $8 or $9 million that's going up this year. And so, again, a great editorial about all the money that's coming out of the economy, and it's just not addressed. And so as I sit there and listen, and I appreciate the debate that we've had over the last 2 or 3 months. We had a town hall at Killearn. We had 3 commissioners there. It was a great 100 people showed up. And so I really do appreciate it, but I just don't think concerns are being translated to this dais here. I really don't. I think that, and the 5 years I've been involved, I've never seen so many problems actually acknowledged in the media, but they're not getting transferred up here. When you have at least 3 commissioners that say this process is broken, and you're still going to vote for a property tax increase, I think really passes on a perception to homeowners and people who are playing by the rules that there's really no opportunity to be involved, because what else? We have uncovered information that has led you to believe that this process is broken, and you're going to vote for a $7 million increase in fire service fee and a 13% tax increase with at least $2 million that is just easily identified that could be cut. So having said that, again, I would say that I appreciate the dialogue we've had in the last 3 months, but I would have hoped that there would have been more emphasis on some of the recommendations that were brought forward. Thank you.
That's the last speaker.
Mayor, before we get into discussion, we need to move to the DIA for just a minute. We need to allow public input on the DIA's proposed millage rate of 1.000 and the DIA's proposed budget for next year of $357,000 as was presented on September 16th. The hearing for the DIA has been advertised also in the Tallahassee Democrat on September 21st, 2015 in compliance with Florida Statutes 200.065. So if we have any speakers on the DIA's proposed millage rate or proposed budget, it would be appropriate to hear them at this time.
We have no speakers on either the millage rate or the budget for the DIA.
Commissioner Miller?
Well, I just want to make sure, considering that there's so many people out here that are very concerned in the budget process, I don't know how many of you really know what the DIA is. It's the Downtown Improvement Authority. This millage that our attorney is referencing only applies to the people that are in that specific area. It's a very limited area of the downtown. This is all just for information only because I don't know how many people do know that. I'm sorry the DIA executive director is not here to explain these things to you, but it's and I can't tell you the exact, it's basically like Gadsden to Duval and I think Jefferson to Tennessee Street, essentially. And those people had to actually vote that millage rate in at some period of time, and that was done at some point in the past. So,
Commissioner Ziffer. Thank you, Commissioner Miller.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller, for that clarification and also pointing out just for future budget years, I think it would be appropriate for either board members or the executive director to be present at least at one of our meetings where we talk about a substantial amount of money going to the organization. We've had representatives from St. Francis who right now is getting no money from us, and they're here. And we have UPHS representatives here. And last week we had people from all sorts of different organizations who are really struggling and wanted to look for funding, which is substantially less than this amount. So let the lesson be learned next year. Be here.
Understood.
At this point in time, there's opportunity for discussion by the Commission on both the millage rate and the final proposed budget. We do need to ultimately to vote on them separately and vote on the millage rate first. But discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move acceptance of the millage rate of 1.0 mills for the Downtown Improvement Authority.
There's a motion, and it's...
We can wait on the DIA until you finish with the city and come.
We want to do the city
I'd like
first.
to go ahead and get rid of it. I mean,
Can we get rid of it now?
motion and second.
Okay, we can.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you wanted to
It's
do
okay.
the
We'll
DIA.
go first with the general budget. Comments, questions? Commissioner Ziffer.
Sure. Just a conversation, because it did come up at the end here, and Commissioner Maddox and others have been very, very clear, and I agree. We don't want to get into the habit of funding organizations directly, because then we bypass some of these processes that we've set up. But St. Francis is an organization that's been funded since at least 2005, and last year, for whatever reason, I shouldn't say for whatever reason, that they mentioned a couple reasons which occurred. So I'm of the belief that they do serve an invaluable service for us, that they do fill in voids that we don't clearly provide. We've mentioned them in our website. So I'm going to make a suggestion, and I'm going to kind of play off on what our staff recommended to us. I'm going to suggest we fund them in the amount of $30,000. And the way we do that is we show a reduction in our temporary wages of 3% to pay for the reduction in millage we did last week, which is $88,000. So if we reduce temporary wages 4%, that would basically provide the $30,000 needed. So we don't have any other increases. I think we can probably shave that 1% off, and it's not going to hurt our government terribly and the people that we provide services for, and it's going to keep St. Francis able to continue to provide the services that they have for us for at least the last 10 years.
Second.
It's a second to that change. Duly noted. Other questions, comments, motions?
That's motion and second, right? On just St. Francis?
Do you want to do, I assumed it as part of the.
Well, but I think we probably ought to deal with it individually.
That's fine. There's a motion and a second on the St. Francis. Commissioner Maddox.
I'm a huge fan of St. Francis, but I plan on voting against the budget, so I'm not going to vote in favor of adding money to it now.
Okay. On question, Commissioner Richardson.
Just a question. Was St. Francis a part of the Community Human Service Partnership process?
No.
We funded them directly in the past.
Oh, we funded them directly in the past. Okay. All right.
Okay. If there are no additional questions on the motion, as stated by my colleague, Commissioner Ziffer, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Motion passes.
As I understand it, again,
pursuant to the budget being
right. The budget. This didn't change the budget. You took money from one pot to another.
That's
pot.
correct.
Okay. So I'd suggest again, if the commission can address the millage rate issue and the budget, either one is open for discussion. We need actually to vote on the millage rate before we vote on the final budget.
So, Commissioners, comments on the millage rate and budget, but we'll entertain a motion on millage rate when we're ready. Commissioner Ziffer.
Well, I was going to say, if there's any other discussion on the budget, it would impact the millage rate, correct?
Right.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other?
What about discussions about the process? Are we going to have that talk too tonight?
I think we can get there. Maybe after we get through some of these questions, we'll be happy to.
I think it's important to answer some of the questions.
I agree with you.
That Mr. Price brought up, and not that I should do it, but I will answer the first one. And as I understand it, and this covers the mainly reason I want to answer this is because I want to comment on it.
Commissioner, can you pull your mic a little?
Absolutely. I have the topic of discussion constantly since Monday afternoon until now on the COPS budget and how this will be incorporated and how it will be addressed and all of the aspects. What are the details? Do we have to accept them all? Can we accept half of them? Do we have to accept them all now? How will we do it? Can we phase it out? I mean, it has gone on and on and on and on. And so I don't want anyone to have the impression that this has not been extremely deeply discussed, and we still don't have all the answers. I think you could see that here tonight. And as for making policy on this particular item, we had already decided that we were going in the direction, and in a 2002 study, we were told that we needed to hire 100 new officers. So all of that being said, that's really how this has happened this week and how you see us up here today determined to figure out how we're going to resolve the incorporation of these folks into this and future budgets. Yes, I do believe they will be part of the collect. We're figuring them when we're adding up, trying to figure out how much this is going to cost. Yes, they're assumed to be part of the collective bargaining with the terms, with the pensions, with the whole package. And that has been one of the reasons of concern. Commissioner Ziffer brought that up at the business meeting on Tuesday, all the added costs, that this was only going to pay part of salaries and so on. So, but back to that comment I made that we had talked about this as a policy direction for quite a while, and that's why when we get some money from somewhere to help to offset the costs, we're considering it seriously. And and then I'm going to say something about his second question, and then I'm going to let everybody else talk about the rest of it. But the overtime, will this come down with new officers? I have that very same question. So someone else will have to tell all of us the answer to that.
I agree. If we're going to be hiring all these additional police officers, I would think our overtime expenditure in TPD would go down.
Yes, I would think so as well. And we don't have a number there, but we can get you one. Absolutely.
Commissioners, other comments on
There was another question about part-time employees that Mr.
And
Price raised.
horticulturists, if somebody could.
Part-time.
Can you give us the part-time
How many?
employee number?
Yeah, when we looked at the last number of part-time employees, there is about 700 to 800. That fluctuates depending on the time of year, specifically because a lot of those are Parks and Recreation temp employees. In the summertime, that number ramps up as they hire part-time folks to help out with the summer camps, the summer programs during certain sports seasons as they hire more coaches and more refs. That number fluctuates. So the last time we looked at it, there was about 700 to 800 temporary employees.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Ziffer.
So nobody in our budget department can tell us, by us hiring 8 more police officers than we'd originally planned, and I know we're delaying it, we don't know what that overtime savings is going to be? I mean, a ballpark? Because if it's substantial, I think we probably ought to address that tonight. Because I'm feeling very anxious about being specific about what we're doing, because too many generalities are going to provide too many opportunities for things to happen that we may not necessarily want to go. So is there any way we can get that?
Is the chief here?
Yeah, we need to talk to the chief to get that number.
Mayor.
Madam Commissioner Miller.
The reason I asked to speak on this topic is that we had, my aide had gone to the trouble of getting the overtime list from every department in the city. This is accessible to folks. And this is how she determined which department was using the most overtime. I had always thought it was in the utilities, but the utilities actually is a fraction of what is in the police and the parks department. Was pretty surprised, and I want to know, well, I want us going forward to make a much better effort to try to figure out what our needs are here and be judicious about how we go about assigning people tasks. And Chief, I believe, I mean, I can't do any off-the-cuff figuring on this long a column. I can't do that in my head at the dais. But Parks is very definitely in competition with you when it comes to overtime. And I can understand why you're trying to staff every parade that occurs
And so is
in
Parks.
the city,
So is Parks.
including all, well, oh gosh, maybe that explains
That's
it. But
it.
the fact is, we've got to figure this out.
Parades at
We're
events.
spending, not only are we spending a lot of money on overtime, we're going over budget on overtime.
Well, a lot of our overtime gets, as you just mentioned, special events.
No question.
Throughout the year. Some of those things are borne by the organizer, and there's a lot of those things that are borne by the city and the police department as an extension. There's also things such as court time. You have a case that happens on midnight shift, those officers have to go to court, that's overtime. The officers that are on the evening shift, they work their hours, or 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 2 o'clock in the morning. There's not, night court was a great show, but we don't have night court in Tallahassee. There's certain things that are just outside our control and that are just part of the price of doing business when it comes to those things. When there's most of our investigators work, from 8 to 5. And we do have investigators that work evening hours too. They rotate those hours, and we have investigators on until 11 o'clock at night. But if we have an event that happens after that and somebody has to come out, that's overtime driven. Our big thing that we're trying to address through, the additional officers and things like that are when we're paying officers for day-to-day staffing. Obviously we had the uptick of crime in the late spring, and we have been paying overtime throughout the summer to have additional officers working in those evening hours to help try to address that and patrol those areas to help deter some of that activity. So that's voluntary. That's on me. Those are some of the operational decisions that I made to try to help address some of those issues. But there are other things that come throughout, the normal course of business day to day that are really kind of outside of our control.
Commissioners, one thing that I would suggest as we I think we've all expressed a sense of trying to get a process that we can all feel 100% completely comfortable around with regard to the budget. And one issue that I think we flagged, and I would double flag, we talked about this in financial viability last week, is this question of overtime, part-time versus the jump of hiring full-time individuals into positions. So the auditor's office gave us a report a couple of years ago that identified, serious overtime spending in Star Metro. Then recommended as part of a solution to that, the hiring up of new staff. I think we bought in 20 or something like that operate. I mean, significant hiring up. Well, the overtime actually didn't go down. It stayed about the same and then began to increase quite a bit. Now, complicating that story is the fact that we also had the transformation of the bus system that went less spoke and wheel and more out in the field transfers. But this question has to be answered. Does the government end up saving money if we end up bringing people full-time staff? And I'm not qualified to make that argument. I think we need to get into the numbers. But if you hire these folks on, we do know we hire them on, and that's benefits, and that's retirement, and that's a fully loaded position versus what we get right now, which is, you kind of add some money on, and yes, it's a big number at the end of the day, but is it a smaller number than what we would be paying if we were to go out and hire new full-time FTEs into these positions? And I think that's a worthy question for us to, over this next year, get underneath and make a policy as well as practical decision. Do we give more salary lines to these departments, or do we end up sticking with the overtime argument because it saves the government in the long run? It might not be good for employees, but it saves the government in the long run. Commissioner Miller.
I can agree with you on temporary employees, but not on overtime. I think that this is that we've got to get a handle on this as far as scheduling. That would be my on the list of going forward this year. We need to talk about this. Mm-hmm. We need to get this report every quarter so we can see where the problems are and really change the direction this is going.
I agree. Commissioner Ziffer.
The Chief's gone. No, you don't have to come back up. Whatever savings.
He said you don't need to come back up.
You don't need to come back up. But whatever savings, clearly, and I don't know whether, and everything you said makes sense to me. But with that number of new officers, I've got to believe there's at least some which I think we need to apply to continue to bring down whatever we're pulling out of deficiencies or anywhere else. I mean, I think what's come out of all of this, and I'm sorry because a lot of people are here, and probably what's going to happen here tonight is this $500,000 is going to probably pass. But I think what has come out of all of this is there is a very substantial and strong desire on the part of our citizenry to be more engaged, and for us to be more engaged with our staff and to look at doing things differently. Because different in some cases may mean more money, but difference in some cases may be less money. And we need to do that. And it's our responsibility because the electorate has put us into office to do this. And what I am hearing from at least the folks here, and I've heard from many of my friends, is, Gil, you got to look at doing things differently. And I think some people have brought to our attention when we compare ourselves to other municipalities where we are. Now, we're not other municipalities. We're different. We've got, almost half our land mass is not able to raise money through ad valorem taxes. But on the other hand, we own our own utility. But we have an airport, and we have a transit system. We're unique. We're not like many other municipalities. But we can learn from them. So I hope we do that. I have one more comment that has to do with the budget. It's a dollar amount. The body cameras, if we do not get the matching grant, I'm going to make a recommendation that the $300,000 go back into deficiencies fund to help pay for the costs that we're having to pay for these additional cops and their equipment. Because we're going to probably approve this budget tonight that includes the $300,000, and I'd like to account for it in some way so that if we don't get it, it goes towards at least equipment, which is similar to the body camera. That's all.
Great. Commissioner, to your point around doing things differently and I think leveling with the public, it is extremely important that we level around what the real costs are of this government, what we raise and what we spend. And I asked this question the other day at the NEMA meeting, how many people, and I asked the room to answer honestly, and I think about a little bit more than half raised their hands to the question, whether or not you think your property taxes should pay for the law enforcement and the security apparatus that it takes to keep this community safe, meaning TPD's budget. How many people believe that ad valorem taxes, which is how most communities fund their entire operation, believe that those dollars collected from ad valorem ought to at least pay for law enforcement? And, more than half the room raised their hand. And then I pointed out that we're short about $18 million when we compare what we collect versus what we spend on law enforcement. And that's before you get to any other activity of this government. Parks and recreation, streets, drainage, maintenance, all that other stuff. And you layer it on. That's before you get to any of that. And so I think a lot of folks aren't all the way clear around where their tax money is spent once it becomes within this government. We even heard comments tonight, and I think they were sincere in making those comments around expenses on Cascades Park, Gaines Street, and other places, not recognizing that those are different budgets, different collection methods that cannot be used for the operation of the general government. And I don't blame the average person for not knowing that, because there are complicated structures, and they elect us to work through those complicated structures. But the truth is that it comes back to bite us, because people aren't aware of those as a method for running this government. Commissioner Richardson, you pointed out, and I can't agree more, every decision we make up here, we're also, certainly on budget and taxation, also personally impacted by. So we don't make these decisions in abstract of how they land with folks. They land with us the very, very same way. So obviously want to appreciate everybody in the public for your comments, for certainly the constructive comments, the constructive emails, the folks who have come with recommendations to include the budget hawks. I'm not sure if this has been pointed out yet, but of the 14 recommendations that were made by the Citizens for Responsible Spending, 7 of which were adopted into this budget, wholly, 7 of which recommendations that came from a citizens panel were taken into consideration and adopted into this budget. That's at least half. And that allowed us to make some of the movements on the ad valorem that we did. The other point I wanted to make, which is folks have made the assertion that the original request that was made by the city manager's budget was somehow a tactic to then negotiate us down to where we are, so it looks like we made movement. And my response to someone who raised that with me was, the manager and her staff have an obligation to tell us exactly what they think they need. That's their job. And it is then our job as the policymakers to say what we have an appetite for, what we think is real, what we think isn't, what we think we can stand paying for right now, and what we think we may have to kick down the road a little bit. I will tell you very honestly and sincerely, the manager and her staff have been coming to us for at least the last 6 years around the need for revenue. They pointed it out in budget memos. They've told it to us in private meetings. They've said it in various aspects of this government. And when they have met with us individually, we've given them instruction, not now. We cannot do it. The public is still suffering. We cannot tolerate an increase. Those are the conversations that we have had by giving instruction to them. And they've tried to hold back. And now rubber meets the road, and we're, looking at each other like, okay, one-time revenue is down. We've rated deficiencies. We've done here. We've borrowed here to pay, Paul. And now, it's reckoning time. And they made their recommendations around our reckoning, and we gave them feedback that said, not now. We'll have to deal with that later. This is a priority. That isn't. That being said, the hard conversations still remain ahead of us, which is how do we get to a budget that we all have confidence around, reflects the values of this community, and also reflects the pocket tolerance of this community's ability and their willingness to pay for it. And I think that's going to require us making decisions around something we do. Someone made the suggestion that I said, get rid of the utility. That wasn't my suggestion. My point was, we own and operate a utility system. We own and operate Star Metro, a bus system, which we help to subsidize. We own and operate an international airport. We do a lot of things that by themselves would be their own major mega corporations, but they're bought into this full government, and we do them all. And so it requires us asking the question, are we doing something that we shouldn't be doing? And I don't know the complete answer to that. I have a sense of where I would land on that. But those are the kinds of questions I think we have to get underneath if we're going to talk about keeping budgets stagnant for 10 years at a time. 10 years. The only change that happened in that 10-year period was a decrease after the state legislature took its action. Aside from that, the millage has stayed constant with the exception of a decrease for 10 years. And the revenue we generate isn't even enough to pay for our law enforcement, which we all think is principle for local government to do. And those are just facts. It's not hyperbole. It's not, it's not any of those things. It's just the fact of the matter. So this isn't easy work, and I don't think any of us are asking for sympathy. This is what we signed up for. Right. But if we're going to do it differently, it absolutely means not this topical stuff, but the layer beneath of what we're going to offload in order to afford better. Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you were speaking, I was reminded of a quote from the late Doug Jamerson. Those of you who might have known Doug, he was a former legislator but was appointed Commissioner of Education when Betty Castor resigned to become president of the University of South Florida. And Doug would always say, I was happy when Betty passed the torch to me, but I didn't know it was going to be flames first. And so that's kind of how I feel in this position now, because as I'm going through my first budget cycle with the city, we have to contemplate a tax increase, where, as you mentioned, the past 10 or 12 years, you all have had the luxury of not having to entertain that tax increase. And so I kind of envy Commissioner Maddox because, I didn't get a chance to say, here we are, and I don't have to approve or even entertain a tax increase. I wish we all had the opportunity to say that at this point, but we are where we are. And I think we've gone through a very deliberative process. Are there some things we could do differently? There are, and I think we all have acknowledged that in terms of our citizen involvement. And I want to thank Russell, if he's still here, because he and I have talked a number of times. I've gone to his house and we sat down, and he was kind enough to entertain my daughter while he and I met. And I appreciated the suggestions and recommendations. And Mr. Mayor, as you mentioned, I was going to say that as well. Many of those recommendations we did incorporate. And in some instances, we made greater reductions than were suggested. And so yeah, I think that we need to involve our citizens more in this budget process. And I have recommended that, we discuss maybe having a citizens budget committee where we, as we did when I was on the school board, where we involve citizens in the budget process every step of the way in helping us even formulate the budget. We can have that discussion. I'm not saying it's something we have to do, but it worked for us, and I talked to a school board member earlier this week. They're still using that same formula even to this day in their budget compilation, if you will. And the other thing, I think we could have done a better job educating the public about our budget and what was being proposed. I think let people get miseducated before they were educated about exactly what was happening with the budget. And I think based on some of what we heard tonight, we might even want to consider having workshops for our citizens to explain the different budgets and pockets of money, because I'm still trying to learn all the different pockets of money and what we have access to and we don't. It's a very complicated, just as the school board budget, the state budget, municipal budgets are a very complicated thing. It's not so simple as to cut here and don't even regard what the impact of that cut is. You have to look at what, for instance, if we talk about cutting part-time positions from Parks and Recreation, you know, that sounds like a pretty mundane thing to do until you recognize if you've got children during the summer, that's what a lot of parents use for babysitting during the summer. So you cut those part-time lifeguard positions or summer camp counselor positions, and then parents don't have a place to send their kids during the summer. So there is an implication for everything that we do in this budget. But I think we can do a better job of educating and informing our citizens, and of course they have shown a willingness to be educated about our budget and what the different pockets of money are. Because like I said, Mr. Mayor, even in the presentation we heard tonight, often people will talk about capital expenditures that may be blueprint that we have no control over and certainly can't utilize for recurring expenses like salaries and benefits. So we've got to do a better job of educating our citizenry and again, I'm starting to sound redundant, but involving them in this process. And I think we don't end up where we've kind of ended up at this point.
Thank you. Commissioner Maddox, followed by Commissioner Miller.
You have something on point?
No, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I made my impassioned plea last week. I'm not going to put y'all through that again. And I am a Miami Dolphins fan, so I've grown accustomed to losing.
Watch it.
It's true.
Watch it.
So I would try to do so gracefully. Just a couple of points that I wanted to bring up. The first one is, Commissioner Richardson, you mentioned that having the ability to say that we haven't raised property taxes. I think that's for good reason, because that is the hardest hitting tax. It hits people the hardest, and it gets the least amount of money, like the mayor pointed out, for the hardest impact on the homeowner, the property owner, and the small business owner. With 55% of our land being off the tax rolls, a disproportionate amount of that burden goes to those who own property and have businesses. So that's why I think we shouldn't raise it. And I've always felt that way. Further, I'm of the belief, should we ever raise property taxes, I should be able to look people in the eye and tell them that there was no other resort. I couldn't find any other resort. Well, I can't do that. I may disagree with some of my colleagues, but I can't look people in the eye and tell them that. So that's why I'm not going to support it. The confusion issue that the mayor mentioned, as well as Commissioner Richardson, I think on what pays for what budgets, we're intimately familiar with those. And of course, the public isn't necessarily so, and I think for good reason again. That's because the taxpayer only has one pocket, right? It's one wallet for the taxpayer. So we've got a sales tax, a fire services tax, a business tax, a telecommunications tax, a stormwater fee, user fees. So the taxpayer just pays, right? So it's hard to explain to somebody, well, this money goes for that and this money goes for this. And again, the property tax hits people the hardest. I think the only thing I want to leave us with tonight is our process. Mr. Price brought up why were some things brought up at the budget workshop and we're out and then later we're in. And we're in and we're out. I don't know. I can't tell you that. I'm glad that some of the cuts that later the budget hawks adopted, I brought up at the first budget meeting, and I'm glad they made it all the way through to the end and were able to be a positive influence on the overall budget. But we are facing a future problem. I voted tonight for the COPS grant because if we were heck bent on adding that many more officers, I'd rather the federal government have a hand in paying for them. However, when that grant runs out, that's going to be a budgetary impact that's going to continue on. Now, remember, it's going to continue on. Not only do you have to pay to equip and train a law enforcement officer, but you also, they go into a collective bargaining unit. Their pension accrues at 3% when a regular employee accrues, I think, 1.6. or 1.2.
1.6 is, I think, the FRS rate.
Okay.
So 2.25 for
2.25. So you have a 0.75 percentage accrual rate that adds to the pension system that much quicker. So it's a budget impact. I think that, again, I'm going to try to look through the windshield and not the rearview mirror. We need to go through a department-by-department review. Every department. We have outstanding city employees. I think our city employees do a great job. They do the job that they are hired to do. Well, guess what? This is a job that we're hired to do. Mm-hmm. Under the charter, our job is to hold the purse strings. It has been, I don't know what happened in between 2003 and 2012, whether we did zero-based budgeting per year, per department. But in 1993 to 2003, and from 2012 until the present day, we have not done that. We might have drilled down on some things in some years past. I know the mayor mentioned in years past when they raised ad valorem taxes, they drilled down in the budget. I think what is needed and has to happen every so often is to look at every department and say, what is the department's mission? Is that mission still needed? Does that mission need to be changed? Are we efficiently carrying out that mission? And to reprioritize, if necessary, department by department, and then see what you have, rather than just focusing on how much money it takes to run the current level of services and pay for each department that exists today. I think we're doing it backwards. We need to look at the mission, and then once we figure that out, we'll know what the true cost is, rather than just looking at the cost. Because if we continue to just looking at the cost, we'll be back here time and time again asking for more dollars, and it will continue to grow, whether it's not in the best interest of the community or not.
Is that a motion?
For zero-based budgeting? Yeah, well, you got one on the floor, but I'll do it when he's...
Okay.
Commissioner Miller, followed by whomever was next.
Well, we're certainly trying to cover a lot of territory tonight. One of my, well, phooey, you just made me forget what I was going to say. On the tone of the fact that we don't do a good enough job educating the public, I wanted to bring just a couple things to people's minds. You know, we've talked about the millage rate remaining the same over this period of time, and I could go into I went back and looked at from 2010 to the present day to see how much the tax assessor had reduced the ad valorem essentially, and the impact was at the worst 18.8%. We get a letter every year that is part of our budget package, and I literally went back and pulled the budgets off the wall where I keep them. I mean, I keep hard copies of stuff, and looked at that paragraph and added up the totals, and just in 2010 alone, the property values dropped 8.4%, and then that was built upon in the years after that to the 18.8 level, and then we've had 2 years of increased where it went up 3.5 and 3.9. So we're working way back up, but so that's one thing. Those are the years that since I've been elected, that's what we've been working with. No more money, this much less than last year, this much less than last year, this much less than last year. And remember, these are cumulative. In the meantime, we've talked about the Cascades Park and those projects. When Blueprint builds something, all they do is build it. Then they hand it over to the government that has jurisdiction. So in the case of Cascades Park, that came to the city. Well, that was an added, I don't know how many millions of dollars in maintenance per year that was added on. And then we had the Consolidated Dispatch Center, which a lot of you have heard of as a joint dispatch center, the 911 folks. That is, the costs are, that's brand new, and the costs are allocated on that by population. So even though the city's millage rate is less than half of the county's, we are paying 65% of the cost of the CDA because it's population based. And our contribution was something like, and the manager can correct me, but something like $4.6 million of this budget to pay for the CDA. That's new money. These are, and that doesn't even get in. I just wanted to throw those two concepts out there, but that doesn't even get into the increased medical costs and all the other things. It's just more expensive. The government is just more expensive without us adding a single program. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't agree with my commissioners that we need to do one of the assistant city managers today, who was an auditor in the past life, accused me of auditing the budget because I brought him in there and I wanted to know about line 689 on some department's budget. And so please don't think that we take any of this lightly, and don't think we're not working, because we are. I mean, the entire summer for sure, and Commissioner Ziffer, and before that me, we've been saying that we needed to have more workshops, have more workshops, have more workshops. So I'm committed to literally starting today or yesterday or 4 months ago and then continuing on to try to figure out exactly where we can get the most efficiency out of our government. It is a big government. It's always going to be expensive to run. But we are going to look at our processes carefully, and we're going to try to come up with a better way so we don't get here on the last day still with this many people feeling uncomfortable with where we are.
Commissioner Ziffer.
I didn't do this earlier in a motion. I'm going to make a motion as part of the budget that if we do not get the body camera matching funds, that the money goes back into the deficiency fund.
Can we get the motion on the budget?
Motion or the same motion, or which motion is that?
We're putting $300,000 in the budget for body cameras, and it's based upon if we get a $300,000 grant. If we don't get the grant, we're going to have $300,000 sitting in our budget. We're buying police cars and all sorts of other things, equipment. I'm suggesting that my motion is if we don't get the body camera money, that $300,000 goes back into deficiencies to pay for some of those items.
Commissioner Richardson.
Don't we need a motion on the budget?
We already have a motion on the floor?
You can go ahead.
We don't have a motion on the budget. If you'd like to make one, maybe in conjunction with
Mr. Mayor, I would move that.
Well, I'll second his motion for the sake of discussion.
We have a question. We have a motion on replacing or replenishing $300,000 right now allocated for body cameras, back to deficiencies, and eventually to PD for equipment.
If the grant
is not procured.
That's fine. We'll treat that as an adjustment to the budget.
Correct.
That's been presented just like we made an adjustment dealing with St. Francis. So.
Got it. So is there's a motion and a second. If there's no one ready to this, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, in order to move this along, my suggestion would be that we go ahead and remember we're going forward from last week with a tentative millage rate of 4.200 mils. That is included in the resolution, which is Resolution 15R 38AA. And I need to state again that millage rate that a majority of you approved last week exceeds the city's rollback rate by 15.46%. And anyone wants to make that motion, then we'd be moving the millage rate that was approved last meeting.
Is there a motion to adopt?
I'll make the motion.
There's a motion to adopt resolution number 15-R-38AA. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Motion passes 4-1.
And at this point on the city's budget, it's appropriate to move approval of all the adjustments that have been made from last week's tentative budget. That would include everything that is in the agenda item that was discussed by Raul, and also the two items that we've voted on tonight, dealing with the body cameras and dealing with the St. Francis money.
Is there a motion to approve with said adjustments?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and then finally, we...
Do we need to take a vote or no?
Yes, we do need to take a vote on the adjustments.
Do you need to say something else before I do that? Okay, great. There's a motion and a second on the budget as amended. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Motion passes 4-1.
And finally, we need approval of the final fiscal year 2016 budget as amended with adjustments, and approve the appropriations resolution in your agenda item, which is resolution number 15-R-39AA.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in...
I have a question.
Yes.
And I apologize. And I think I had an explanation, but I just want to publicly make sure that we're clear on this. In the budget, on J20, there is a reduction in tennis operations somewhere in the vicinity of around $65,000 from last year to this year. And it was explained to me that all the other departments were affected the same way. It's an administrative adjustment. But I'm looking down this list and none of the others were. We had a lot of people last week that were concerned about tennis operations, and in the budget we've reduced it some $60,000. So is tennis going to change at all?
The only reduction in tennis is based on the updated payroll costs. The numbers that you're looking are the estimated, what we had estimated to budget, and that's the difference of $65,000. But the actual number for the budget goes down about $12,000, and that's just related to the update of personnel costs for the tennis program. There are no cost reductions related to the tennis program itself.
Well, it's almost a $60,000 reduction from 14 actual. So
there are no program reductions in tennis in the budget.
Okay.
The ball's in your court.
I gave up tennis, but
there's a motion. Commissioner Miller.
And on that note, I would like, and I think we asked for this today, but you probably didn't get around to it, given that you were probably busy today trying to figure out how we're going to pay for the COPS program. I would like to have a completely reprinted hard copy of the general fund portions of the budget, so that we have the accurate, voted on per the vote tonight.
We will be reprinting the entire budget document with all the new numbers, and you'll be getting that in the next week or next couple of weeks.
All right, thank you.
Right. There's a motion and a second to adopt the budget as has been amended. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no.
Nope.
Motion passes 4-1.
Finally, we need two more motions. We need approval for the Downtown Improvement Authority's final millage rate of 1.00 mils, and for approval of resolution number 15-R-38AA, which contains that millage rate.
So moved.
There's a motion to approve the DIA's budget, and there's a second. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously.
Finally,
we vote on before
that was for the
we didn't vote.
Rate.
Oh.
We pushed
the last motion we need is approval of the DIA's final fiscal year 2016 budget, which totals $357,000.
So moved.
What is this in?
This is on the budget for the DIA.
The DIA's budget.
There's a second? There is a motion and a second to approve the final budget of the DIA. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, that concludes all the budget items on the city and the DIA.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, if there are no further items, we will stand in adjournment. All right?
for the Northwest Florida Water Management District. Number 3, but wait, what would I get for that 3 cents or 14 cents a day? That's the part that's most important. The city calls the budget a public safety budget, and funding comes from a number of areas. So what's really being increased? I found out. There will be 18 more men and women in the Tallahassee Police Department to respond to calls for help, and 16 more firefighters to staff a new station that's dramatically improving response times in the eastern part of the city. Now, there'll be a new person to maintain Cascades Park, which is gorgeous but needs a ton of maintenance due to the high use.